Live from the world headquarters of the Pro Cannabis Media Network, I'm the founder of PCM TV, Jimmy Young in Massachusetts,
And I'm Eric Williamson in Arizona.
which is about as close to coast as you can get. Yes, indeed. We actually do a weekly news show called Cannabis Coast to Coast with Elena Pinto. We postponed the news show this week because we know that anything that we report on today will be dated tomorrow and certainly the next day. We're on the eve of one of the most important elections of my lifetime, and it's a long lifetime. And I'm very happy to be here with some great guests and great panelists. I think what I'd like to do, Eric, is actually introduce everybody, and
That's
then
great.
we can go ahead with our prepared graphics that kind of shows the history of the fight to end cannabis prohibition over the last 5-6 years, because there's been quite a bit of movement that gets us to this point where we actually have two presidential candidates who are both looking for reform of cannabis laws at the federal level. And that is unprecedented and historic. And that's why we're very happy to welcome in a great panel of people. And we're going to start with Hirsch Jain, who is from Los Angeles. And he is are you the CEO of Ananda?
That's right. I'm the founder and CEO.
Founder and CEO. See, I like the founder one. The CEO, way too much responsibility for me. Okay. I've decided I'm just going with the founder and be very happy. So we appreciate you joining us. And you are at MJ Unpacked in St. Louis over the next 48 hours, right?
Correct. I'm really happy to be here in St. Louis at the historic Union Hotel. Was just at a reception there. Incredibly beautiful. So
yeah, look, I love that event, and I love George Jage. You know how much I appreciate and respect him.
Love George.
And right below you is Mark Pedersen, who is an accomplished author who has a very long, tremendous personal story. But it was Mark's article that was published in Sensi Magazine this past week that I got to read, and I found it to be one of the most compelling, educational, balanced, informative articles that I've written, that I've read. I didn't write it. You wrote it, Mark. And I give you credit because you did a great job. Mark, thank you so much for joining us here on Monday night.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate having me on.
You bet. And Eric, you've already kind of met. So I'm going to introduce Sean Kiernan from the Weed for Warriors Project out in Las Vegas, Nevada. He too has a very interesting personal story and how he got to be where he is. So Sean, we welcome you to this program, this live program.
Thank you, Jimmy.
All right, guys, let's just roll that first graphic, Eric, that we prepared, because we kind of look back and how did we get here? How did we move this needle so far? And what I did was I went through our past 6 years worth of news and found which I felt to be the most important monumental things to move forward in this whole federal reform movement that some may call the Green Rush or may not. But I believe it all started with the repeal of the Cole Memo back in January of 2018 under the former Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who was Donald Trump's Attorney General. And what that memo did was it reversed what had been in place during the Obama administration that basically said the feds should stay out of legal states' cannabis business. So needless to say, they rescinded that. And all of a sudden, everything happened in the beginning of 2018. It happened to coincide with my first podcast, In the Weeds with Jimmy Young, in April of 2018, which was the month that YouTube purged its site of all cannabis content. So it's one of the reasons why I went with a new site called the Weed Tube, and that's where the first iterations of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young were, and they stayed there for a while. And the Green Rush, not only was it a name of a show that we did live here for about 2.5-3 years, but it also described the rush towards reform that was rolling out starting in 2019 to 2024. There were 15 states that brought in adult use legalization of cannabis to their states through their legislature. It started, I think Vermont was the first state to do it through their legislature, and others did it through ballot questions. And of course, tomorrow there's 4 other states that have ballot questions on their to decide which way they're going to go in their state. And as far as Congress goes in 2021, there was the passing of the MORE Act and the States Act and the Safe Banking Act, all in the House, by the way, because everything died in the Senate because the Senate is evenly, or at least was evenly, between these two parties. When I put in this Supreme Court insight, I do give Justice Clarence Thomas a good grade, because he did point out the fact that there is a big problem between the federal laws and the state laws, and he articulated that in a memo in June of 2021. But in my blog that you can find on procannabismedia.com or on our new app, PCM TV, you could find out that he did a great job with that memo, except for one slight little thing. He never used the word race, and I thought that was odd. Let's just leave it at that. I don't know. I don't have an opinion. I just thought it was odd that he left that word out. CAOA introduction. That, of course, is the Cannabis. Let's see if I can get this right. The Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act that Senators Chuck Schumer, Cory Booker, and Ron Wyden introduced in July of 21, and it has there was a lot of there's certainly a lot of attention on that bill when it first came out, and it has died quietly in the Senate. I used Brittany Griner in here as another thing that brought the nation's attention to the laws that not only exist still in this country, but also in Russia. She was found with a hash oil vape pen in her carry-on and ended up spending almost a year in a Russian prison. So that was a very major story in the cannabis space, and is certainly bringing attention to these laws that are so different, not only from country to country, but also state to state in this republic of ours. And then in 2022, we are going to give credit to President Joe Biden because he did at least make an attempt to pardon those who had a federal conviction for low-level cannabis possession crimes. Now, you've got to understand, the reports were that he let thousands out, and it was more like 50. So there's a big difference there. But Eric, you could take us from that point to where we are today on the eve of a very historic election, and we can then get right into our panel, because I think every one of them has probably an opinion about every single thing that we've said so far.
They're just waiting, chomping at the bit.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I'm going to stick to my notes. Thanks, Jimmy. In August of 2023, the HHS decided to recommend that DEA reschedule cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a lower classification, making that significant shift. Then in December 2023, we had the presidential pardon from President Biden that let out, 15 possession-related cannabis crimes?
Yep.
And that was critical. And then in April 2024, the DEA went through their rescheduling and, moving from where it was to, hey, let's do something else. I think that's a big tease, but it's been now moved into 2025, like the government.
Right.
And then
delay. Yep.
delay. I mean, you only how many fingers you have to delay. Right. Then in December 2024, VP on legislation, she appeared on that All the Smoke podcast, Jimmy. And, did she reiterate the administration stance, or will that change? That no one, quote unquote, no one will go to jail for smoking weed.
Or should go to jail for smoking weed. It's really, and
no one should go. You're right.
Right. And that's right.
That's the operative word there.
And it was that podcast was hosted by two former Golden State Warrior players. And I'm pretty sure that Kamala was a fan of those Golden State Warriors back when they were champions. Not that they're not any good now, but let's just say they were champions back then.
They're terrible right now.
I don't say that. I'm not saying it. Steph Curry, by the way, is one of the greatest shooters, if not the greatest shooter of all time. And look at that. It only took me 10 minutes to make a sports reference. All right. So, let's talk about, go ahead, because this to me is one of the most interesting developments over the last few months is that October 24th. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, that October 24th, our good friend, former President Donald Trump said, you know what? I think I'm going to be a yes in Florida for Yes on 3. That campaign was to secure adult use and cannabis legalization in Florida, reflecting that broader trend of states moving forward toward the progressive cannabis laws. So let's talk about that briefly.
Yeah. So the poll question that was put out, I'm guessing within the last 48 hours, was by YouGov America, and basically they're coming up with the same conclusion that a lot of people are saying, that legalization is better than decriminalization, and if Trump is the decriminalization candidate and Harris is the legalization candidate, then most of the industry would like to see the legalization, or at least moving towards legalization. Hirsch, Jane, I'm gonna start with you just because you're at the top of my screen, and ask you a question. As you look in the crystal ball, either one of these candidates wants to make changes at the federal level. Can we cling to that hope and not worry so much about the result?
Well, first, I mean, Jimmy and Eric, I want to say I think you guys did a great job walking through that timeline. And I just wanted to say I noticed as you were going through that timeline, if we were back in 2018, there are only about 8 adult use states. Right now, there's 24. So as you were walking through that, Jimmy, I was just thinking to myself, you know, in 6 years, we've tripled the number of adult use states from 8 to 24, which is pretty remarkable. And, you know, I think if tomorrow goes well, we could have 27. So that just shows you the pace of change. And I'll also say on your Clarence Thomas thing, you know, his point was that half the states, you know, were in and half were out. And as we get to more than half, you know, does that argument get even more compelling, as you were pointing out? So I think that's absolutely true. And look, I think we could spend, you know, this whole hour debating Trump versus Kamala. I think I'll make just a couple of pretty maybe obvious points. First, it's encouraging that both of the candidates in their own way have expressed support for cannabis reform. We can debate which one is better, but we should note that that is both historic. I think you'll see people make arguments different ways. You'll see people crediting Kamala for some of the steps you were talking about, Jimmy, with the Biden administration. You'll see other people criticizing her, saying, hey, in California, when she had a chance to support legalization, she didn't, right? So you'll hear some of that. You know, and you might even hear people say, hey, look, she's supporting legalization, but her plans aren't really specific about how to do so. So I think that's all fair. And then I think you'll also hear, you know, back and forth on the other side. People will note that, you know, Trump appointed Jeff Sessions, right, which is fair. On the other hand, they'll note that, you know, in some of the comments you were mentioning, Jimmy, he does lay out some pretty decent, impressive specifics about the need for banking reform, and has, at least you hear that he has met people at, you know, at Mar-a-Lago that use cannabis medically. So he's had his own kind of come to Jesus moment. It seems somewhat authentic. So there's not really a clear answer in there, but I think you can make arguments back and forth on both of them.
There you go. Mark Pedersen. So how did we get here? It's been quite a journey, right? And one thing I found out is that you and I were born in the same year, which makes me feel so good that I can talk openly with somebody my own age about, you know, the same experiences growing up in the late 50s, early 60s. And, you know, look, I still haven't recovered from the 60s. I was a rebel then. I'm still a rebel. And all the greatest leaders of my youth got shot. And that probably scarred me for life. I mean, what effect did that have on you, Mark, if you don't mind me asking?
Excuse me. Which is the question here?
So the question is, what impact on your own life, your own upbringing, when JFK, Robert Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King all got shot and killed in the same decade of the 60s. And in my estimation, they were some of the greatest leaders of our time. And Bobby Kennedy was on my wall because I felt like he was the smartest Kennedy of all. So just what were your impressions of that growing up in that time, and how much of an impact may it still have on you?
Well, it was actually looking back from today, it's one of kind of questioning, really, because so much of the things that I learned and I believed back in the 60s and then into the 70s really is proven untrue in so many different ways. You know, there's a lot of hero worship all along, but there was also a lot of graft as well. So, you know, it's having a lot of our heroes shot down once you find out the truth, you know, then led into a lot of the disillusionment that we've had in this country.
Right. It's a great point about disillusionment with our government, and I hear more and more of it as we get deeper and deeper. Although I'm gonna spin it immediately into a positive. The best thing about the election tomorrow is no more political ads, guys. Okay. I mean, I got to tell you, I am overwhelmed. I don't want to see another one, and I don't want to hear another one. Sean Kiernan from the project, the Weed for Warriors project. Tell us a little bit about your organization, Sean, and then we'll get into some more questions. Go ahead.
Right. No, it's a Weed for Warriors project. It's just a group of disabled vets who got together. We officially launched in 2014. My partners, Kevin Richardson and Mark Carrillo, we've been together since. It effectively started as a way under Prop 215, which was the, proposition that passed in 96. Dennis Perone helped push with a lot of other wonderful people that legalized medical cannabis in the state. Excuse me. Apologies. What's the question again you were asking?
Tell us about your project. Tell us about your project.
Sorry, I skipped. Something fell from me. And effectively, it came together because patients and growers were elevated. And they were elevated where one needed the other. To grow, you needed patients, and for patients, you needed a grower. So they would come to we got together once a month, every chapter in the state. We blew up from one chapter to like 28 at our top in California, and we went national. And it basically was born out of the need to bring growers and patients together because that's what you needed to be legal in the state of California. And so it's a way that we donated cannabis to us and therefore got our recommendations to grow.
Veterans, guys, I'd like to ask each one of you how this country has treated our veterans in regards to access to medical cannabis. It's one of those injustices that riles me and keeps me going every single week. Hirsch, what can we do? Are we moving in the right direction? Have we at least made people aware of the fact that veterans can't go to the VA and even talk about medical marijuana?
Well, I mean, I think that has not changed, right? I mean, veterans still can't talk to the VA is where veterans get their health care, and they're still unable to do so. I mean, obviously, Sean can speak about this much more fluently than I, but objectively, we have not made progress, right? And even in states that have legal cannabis, often cannabis is prohibitively expensive. There are some programs and organizations such as Sean's that try to make cannabis, affordable for veterans, but in most instances, it's not. So obviously, it's good that the broader society is recognizing the medical utility of cannabis, but I don't think anyone can make the case that we're serving veterans well when it comes to cannabis access.
That's right. Mark, I know you might have some opinions on this as well. And I look at that. Thank you for your service. At least we're getting that out there, Sean, for your guys. But Mark, tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, about your own personal story and how we got to where we are and why you're such an advocate for change.
Well, in particularly about veterans. I've been surrounded by veterans my whole life, ever since being a child, and I had two brothers who were veterans as well. But it's been a thing. Then all through college, my best friends were all people who were there on the GI from Vietnam and such. So it's just and since then, and of course, since during this cannabis thing. Over the last 20 years, I've done a number of interviews with veterans talking about issues like post-traumatic stress and Agent Orange, and a lot of different things that they're up against. So it's there. I've seen a lot of growth. I've seen some great growth in this country and some tremendous things happening. I'm also very frustrated, though, because I know that if we would have just pushed for real legalization across this country, we could have ended a lot of these problems and a lot of the problems that have actually arisen since because of all this mess. So many millions of dollars have been spent just pushing recreational programs when we have people who are suffering, people who really need access, and we have an industry that could dwarf what we're looking at today in tremendous ways and access so many others. So,
there's going to be some changes tomorrow, no matter what, when it comes to the makeup of the House and the Senate. I believe there are 468 seats available in the Congress, 33 in the Senate, 435 in the House. And of course, 4 states have ballot questions. Eric, I'm going to toss it to you to allow you to have an opportunity to ask some questions and get involved with this conversation too, because I know as an MJ award-winning podcast host, you can handle that.
Thanks, Jimmy. Specifically, panel, that minority impact, that a lot of individuals of color are in prison, and we don't really have a strategy for that. What's some of the feedback that you say for those individuals who are stuck in that grind, unfortunately?
Yeah. Mark, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Could you say that once again? What did you say exactly?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to minorities, Black and brown individuals, they're proportionally jailed long time ago for crimes that right now it's legal to have possession in some states. So when we look at that outlook, everyone wants something. Are we overlooking some of our minority friends that are locked up, like organizations like the Last Prisoner Project comes to mind, where they're trying to help those individuals that are in that yucky turnstile of issue. So what's your position on that? What's your feeling about that?
Well, that is a huge issue. Is a huge problem. It is minorities are the ones who end up getting the brunt of the issues that we deal with within cannabis. The things that we've seen has just been escalated even greater when you're talking about minorities. I recall right off the bat, I interviewed a guy a number of years back who was a major trafficker of cannabis back in the day, and literally pallet loads that he was importing into the country, and he got busted, and he spent quite a bit of time in federal lockup. And I think about that situation, and right around that same time, there was he was a white guy, and he did time and he got out. Now, in the ones who were on the fishing boats, who were out pulling the bales of cannabis out of the water that were being shipped in, that were being dropped off by the planes. One of those gentlemen, he had been locked up for over 26 years at that point because he was Hispanic.
Yeah.
So yes, it's hugely disproportional. And
I'm going to interject here. 220,000 people in this country were arrested for possession crimes of cannabis in 2023. That would be last year. Hirsch, how in the world are we ever going to get away from profiling and filling our privately run prisons? And needless to say, it's created an incredible disrespect for law enforcement in this country. So Hirsch, will you go first, and then I'll go to Sean. Go ahead.
So what I'll say is, first, obviously, we can't deny the history that cannabis criminalization has basically been a war on people, right? War on communities of color for the past half century. That's well documented through books like, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. So that's a historical fact. I think the way that we get away from it is twofold. One, we stop arresting people for cannabis, right? Even, we were just talking about in Florida, that has a medical program. I think 16,000 people were arrested last year, right, for cannabis. And of course, that's at the discretion of local law enforcement. So if you're in the wrong county in Florida, right, and you're a person of color, you're much more likely to be arrested. So that's one piece of it. We stop arresting people for cannabis. And the second piece of it is, all nonviolent cannabis prisoners should be released from prison. And I know people call on the president to do that. Unfortunately, a lot of these are state and local issues, right? So that's another challenge that this faces. But I think that's the other, critical component of this. And then there, are still other elements we could talk about, right? Which are record expungement, which means even if people are no longer in prison, that can still be a barrier to their future reentry. So that's a whole other.
Exactly.
And that's one of those things that I did leave out of the highlights, if you will, to get us here. But some of the states, Massachusetts is one, Maryland is another one, actually did expunge and pardon past cannabis convictions in the last year or so, and that is a good step. And I guess the topic is what is going to drive legalization? Is it the social justice element of it that Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey, brings up all the time, and I totally agree with him? Or is money going to dictate what ultimately happens? And I'm going to start with Sean on that one. You made a comment. You said money speaks. Isn't that what you said?
Money does speak, fortunately, unfortunately, how you look at it. I mean, listen, I think the social justice aspect of this, the disproportionate impact on communities of color, we see attempts to remedy it via social equity in states, California and many other states. One of the Florida question 3 doesn't have a social equity component, which some people are upset about, and pro-cannabis people are detracting and voting on because of that. Problem is with a lot of those programs, they haven't worked very well. Right. And so I always say, wait, we're taxing the cannabis community that had a war driven against it to pay effectively reparations for those cannabis crimes on communities of color. It doesn't make a lot of sense to charge those people had a war on to pay for the crimes of the war. Maybe they should get the DEA budget, because the problem is when you try to fix these things, they're not easily fixable via the cannabis market. Because the more taxes you put on to pay for all this stuff, guess what happens? All you do is drive the illicit market. And what we're seeing on the left coast is cannabis in Oregon and taxes in California, they're declining. Not because we're selling less cannabis, because we have an illicit market. And how do you deal with that? And so I would say, go back to your question, is it's got to become from the business model. We need a business model platform that works, that extinguishes the illicit market. And that's only going to happen through low taxes, efficient regulations, and a federal platform that really supersedes and allows interstate commerce. That's the only way I think you have a successful platform, and that's got to be driven by money.
There you go. Anybody want to chime in on that comment? Mark? Hirsch?
I'd be happy to. Well, back to if I could mention about the expungement portion quickly, it's a fallacy. I've proven that already with the writing my initiative. The whole thing with expungement is not true. It's a lie. They basically, what they do is they seal your records with a court order. They can have access to them and use them to prosecute you. That is a fact. If you'd like to read up on it, you can go to my website and you can actually read the statewide audit that was on my initiative for the state of Missouri, and they actually talk about that at length. That's actually one of the reasons why I couldn't go forward with my initiative, because they were saying in order to truly legalize cannabis in the state of Missouri, it was going to cost the state of Missouri upwards of $1 billion to do so, which was totally ridiculous. But again, too, it shows the way that the state responded back to real legalization. So the other question, sorry.
Yeah, no. That's a great point. And, there is a difference between expungement and pardoning. And that's something that, and again, this is the thing I love about this industry. There's so many elements to it about what you can learn, and you can learn about law, and you can learn about agriculture, and you can learn about science, and you can learn about growing. And I mean, there's so many elements to this industry. But I know that we're up against the half-hour clock, Eric, so I want to keep an eye on that and take a break here if possible, and then come back. And I want to ask all three of you, are we in the middle of a civil war between the hemp industry and the cannabis Delta-9 industry? And was it caused by the Farm Bill of 2018, which basically legalized the cannabis sativa plant, but put a 0.3% limit on THC in dry weight until Human Elements figured out a way to, well, you could still get high from that stuff. You just have to light it up. They didn't understand that when they passed that bill. I mean, I'm just like, how in the world did they miss this? All right, Eric, can we take a break here and then come back?
Yeah, it'll be a quick break.
Okay.
Throwing money at marketing and sales tools that don't deliver? Introducing a Lead, your all-in-one business superhero at a fraction of the cost. Imagine a world where your marketing campaigns don't fizzle like a wet firework. Your sales pipeline isn't as messy as your sock drawer. Your website isn't as boring as a tax code. A Lead makes it all possible and affordable. But here's the catch. Traditional pricing, it's like trying to buy a unicorn at a horse auction. Expensive. Here is the average small business monthly budget breakdown. Marketing tools, $100. Then a sales software for $80. How about a website builder? That's another $50. Don't forget to use a CRM to track all the networking groups you attend to store business card information. Yep, $40. Oh yeah, the latest greatest artificial intelligence, automation tools, another $30. And the list goes on, but we're different and feeling quite generous to help reduce those critical monthly fees. For a limited time, you can get a Leadly, the all-in-one marketing suite for just $1 per day. That's right, $365 for a year of unlimited everything. There are pay-as-you-go costs for as-needed services with the average small business spending, just $25 to $35 per month. If you want, dedicated SMS calls and a marketing phone number, inbound and outbound text messages and phone calls, email sending, email address validation, content AI, workflow AI, reviews AI, WordPress website hosting, unlimited CRM contacts, no more contact limits, unlimited email sending. Say goodbye to email restrictions, smartphone app for iOS or Android. Manage your business on the go, even if you're stuck in traffic. Unlimited funnels. Create as many sales funnels as your heart desires. Unlimited landing pages. Capture leads like a pro. Unlimited appointment scheduling. No more double booking disasters. Unlimited AI automation. Let AI handle the grunt work while you sip margaritas on a beach or at least at your desk. Plus the best part, all future upgrades and bug fixes are included. But hurry, spots are filling up faster than a donut shop on a Monday morning. Once these spots are gone, the price goes back up to the original $300 per month. Don't miss out on this incredible deal. Over $800 in yearly savings. Act now and start saving your business from inflation. By leveraging a Leadly's comprehensive features and capabilities, small business owners can streamline their operations, improve efficiency, and drive growth. Click the link in the video description to schedule a meeting with us to answer questions or get you onboarded. Remember, this offer is limited and spots are limited. Thanks for watching.
Okay, we're back. We're back.
Hey.
And thank you for staying with us, Eric. How do you get a hold of the Leadly group? I didn't see anything there. Like a phone number or an ad or a website.
Yeah, it's easy. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. All right. It's a link is in the description of where you're actually watching from, so they could just go to the link and click on there.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you. I knew you'd clarify that because I had no clue. Hey, before we went to that break, I'd thrown out a question about this civil war. What role did the Farm Bill in 2018 have by quote unquote legalizing 0.3% cannabis sativa, calling it hemp, and the human element gets involved in a loophole and is able to spin it. So now they have products that are basically hot hemp that can get you high, that are available in convenience stores and gas stations. And now that group, the hemp industry, if you will, is not necessarily fighting with the cannabis industry. However, the cannabis industry isn't really thrilled that non-licensed, non-tested products are in the market that they're trying to get into. Sean, I'm sure you have an opinion about this. Are we in the middle of a civil war, or is this exactly what the government wanted to do, which was pit two sides of the same plant against each other?
Yeah, the conflict between a federal model and the state models. And you see places like California where they outlawed hemp anywhere outside the legal cannabis dispensaries because of the competitive disadvantage. Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a fight, right? The state license holders want to ban it or control it. They don't like the fact they have it competitive because it's regulated like agriculture. It's a hell of a lot cheaper than being regulated like a cannabis business in these states, right? With the extreme cost. And so the few things I just want to touch upon about the Farm Bill is how beneficial it was to patients and people who use it, especially in states that there is no access, Texas, et cetera. Think about it, Texas. I went back after having, I'm one of those felonious possession guys in 2015. It involved Texas. I'll leave it at that. And I went back 2 years ago and got to smoke in the open. Why? Because they can't differentiate between hemp and cannabis. And the cops have given up trying to, right? And all these veterans who were having to pay way too much in the illicit market for cannabis are at least able to access marijuana light, call it, whatever you want to call it. Like you said, hot hemp. It's better than nothing. And so it's had a tremendous beneficial decriminalization aspect on a federal level. Because of the difficulty, you have to test it, and most of these police departments don't have the ability to test it like that. So they stopped harassing in a lot of places. So that's a beneficial. But no doubt, I mean, I've been in a couple of board meetings or on some board meetings with cannabis companies, and their marching orders is when you can substitute hemp for cannabis, even with D8 or whatever, we want to do that in our supply chain. So that should tell you all you need to know.
There you go. Hirsch, what's your feeling about this division between the two?
Yeah, I first I just want to echo a lot of what Sean said. I think Sean is making a good point about access, right? I think even critics of the quote unquote hemp industry have to acknowledge that it is more accessible, right? Sometimes than regulated industries and can be more affordable for veterans. And also, again, even critics will have to acknowledge that it's had a normalizing effect, right? Because it is legal and prevents cops from doing that. So I think those are both good points that Sean made. I'll just make the other, again, maybe obvious point that this legal distinction doesn't really make sense, right? Obviously, it's just one plant, the cannabis plant. And, the legal distinction the 2018 Farm Bill made between what it defines as marijuana and what it defines as cannabis, and the fact that one is legal and the other is federally legal, that obviously makes no sense. And so that has to be reconciled at some point. Yeah.
And Mark, I'm going to get to you, and I'm going to throw this out as a factoid that happened actually today, a news item, that the U.S. Cannabis Council, a lobbying group for the MSOs in Washington, D.C., has rejected hemp leaders from joining their board. So are we in the middle of a civil war here, Mark?
We have been for quite some time. I mean, for as long as I've been in cannabis, there's been that division between hemp and real cannabis. I don't know how else you put it. I mean, 15 years ago, it was all called hemp. Okay. Now, all of a sudden, cannabis is different than marijuana, which is different. It's so ridiculous in so many different ways. Delta 8 is a chemistry project. Yeah. Right. I look at that as a consolation prize. That's all. A consolation prize. It's not what we want. It's not where we should be. It's not where we should be going for. If we want legalization in this country, I can tell you right now, we have 16 states in this country that can do a direct initiative now, right now. Now that's going to change with each election. That gets smaller. That's going to get smaller and smaller. There are interests within. There are politicians right now that are working very diligently to eliminate our ability to self-govern through the initiative process. But that is how any major law, when it comes to cannabis, there is where we've made those changes. All we need is one state that truly legalizes. But I wish we could get at least 3 or 4. I could tell you which states those would be. They would be the ones that where you could gather the least number of signatures. Because if we put real legalization on any ballot throughout this country, it will pass. I know that for a fact. You can argue about it all you want, but I know it would happen.
And it is the one item in all elections that increases the voter turnout, which is fascinating to me unto itself. That people still don't. I mean, I've talked to at least a half dozen people who said, "Oh, I'm not going to vote. It's not going to matter." I'm like, I mean, that just kills me as an American, because it is the right that our veterans have fought for years. The freedom to vote and have your own time where you get to pick the candidates that you want to represent you, or at least stay in office longer than they should. Oh, sorry, did I go there? Hirsch, what's your feeling now about the future? Should we have one regulatory body that regulates both the synthetic or artificial or Delta 8 world and the Delta 9 cannabis licensed tested world?
That's a good question. You know, I don't know if I have a really strong opinion on that. I think what you're likely to see is a different approach, right or wrong. You're likely to see a different approach state by state. I think each state is kind of, you know, Jimmy asking itself the question that you're asking. Do we have the same body do this, or do we have different bodies? And I think that depends on whether that state, like Sean was making a good point earlier about how California has taken a really restrictive approach towards hemp, and there are some adult use states that have done that. And so I don't know if I have the genius answer on that one, but I think, fortunately or unfortunately, we're likely to see a bifurcated by state approach on which agencies are regulating which industries, which again will add to the chaos and the confusion, I think, in these states, unfortunately.
Yeah. Isn't it an agricultural product, Sean? I mean, you can grow this stuff, right?
Yeah, hemp is considered agriculture. It's treated like agriculture. And I think what, you know, Hirsch is talking about, this weave of different ways we're dealing with it, is part and parcel of the problem, how we've legalized it. And I think that matters. And Mark's touching on it very well. I don't think we've legalized it necessarily the best way, but, you know, bottom line, it's brought freedom. So I'm not going to knock it too much. But I think we have a lot more to go because of things Mark and Hirsch both just highlighted.
Yeah. Eric, it's your turn. I'll let you go ahead and ask a question for the panel. Go ahead. I'm sure you could come up with something. I know you will.
Well, Hirsch, this is directed to you. You know, when you see how we work with each other inside the industry, you know, peer to peer, it's always a licensing issue. Like, I don't want to talk to you. Where does the newcomer in the industry get to, you know, where's the roadmap for the newcomer?
Yeah, you know, I will say this. I am constantly seeing an influx of new people into cannabis, and I think a lot of times you see that in new states that are opening up, to be honest with you. And as I think the industry gets bigger, there's opportunity for more people, and as cannabis gets destigmatized, there is more of a willingness for people to participate in the industry. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that, at least I think cannabis is so complex that I've seen a lot of people come in from other industries, right? And like, especially you see these high flying executives come in from other spaces and they come into cannabis and they can't really get their bearings. So I guess I am a believer, you know, as someone who's been in this for like 7 years now, which by some standards is a long time, by some standards is not a long time, right? It just shows you some people have been in this game for 25 years, right? But I guess, you know, for me, it's like, you know, it's been a learning curve. And I'm learning more every day. So I know that's not a great answer, but I am heartened. Like, I'm here in Missouri, right? And I think there's a bunch of people who are working in cannabis today in Missouri who weren't working in cannabis a couple years ago. And that's a good thing, right? And I think we'll continue to see that going forward.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Mark's in Missouri too. Right, Mark?
Yes.
But you're not, I know you're not attending MJ Unpack because we talked about that earlier. But so where do we go? Where do we go from here, Mark? Let me ask you that question. What do you think the future looks like? And I'm going to guess that it has something to do with the results of this election that we may not know for a week or two.
This election is going to determine a lot. I mean, I already, like last week, I was hearing Vance trying to make connections with cannabis, saying that fentanyl was being laced with cannabis. You know, that's a huge issue. There's more fear, and we don't need that. And it kind of tells you that it's going to be a very unstable situation if we go that direction, I'm afraid. Going the other direction with Harris, well, there is MORE Act. Harris was very much involved with the MORE Act. The MORE Act has major problems as well. And everybody, including NORML, is raving about the MORE Act. Well, the MORE Act will bring federal oversight. It's going to bring additional regulation on the states. It's going to mean a federal excise tax that's going to be on top of the excise taxes that people are already dealing with within their states. It's a mess. We don't want the feds involved in this. It's not real legalization. It's just more of the same, and we don't need more of the same. Unfortunately, I'm still at that point where I believe that we're going to win this battle on state by state. I don't see any other way. You cannot do what we can do in a state. You can't do that on a federal basis. And you're dealing with a lot of very corrupt people on the federal level. So.
On every level, humans, it goes back to what Sean said about money. It really can be the root of all evil, and people just do the grab. I'm going to get in this cannabis space. I'm going to make a lot of money. It doesn't work like that, does it? I have yet to talk to anybody who's made a ton of money in weed.
Well, understand, sir. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt here, but just understand that when you're dealing with a direct initiative, you bypass the lawmakers, you even bypass the governor of the state to bring an issue directly to the people, and then the people decide to put it on the ballot. The only problem we have there is the Secretary of State has the right to write the summary for that. And there's the problem. And they can manipulate that summary to say whatever they want.
We're just trying to get the questions agreed. And look what happened in Arkansas, people. I mean, I know you all have been following the news that Arkansas had this voter initiative to expand their medical program. They were to go out and collect 80,000 signatures, and then they changed the rules and made it 120,000. They got there, and then the Secretary of State came in and said, okay, these signatures aren't any good. And then I think there was another move that got that question back on the ballot. And then finally, the Supreme Court of Arkansas basically said, well, even though the question's on the ballot, we're not going to count those votes. I mean, it's like, oh my goodness gracious. And what can you do? What can you do? I mean, Sean, I know you have great ideas on this type of thing. How are things going to change to a positive to get to the point where I want normalization and acceptance, not necessarily legalization?
Right. I mean, the truth is, many cases, the health component of this, there's a lot of people who don't want that. Restricting advertising, restricting billboards. Look at Meta. They don't want to normalize cannabis at all. I mean, we have our Weed for Warriors project. Meta deleted both of them. We had huge followings, not only educating, but putting resources in veterans' hands only about the veterans, the suicide overdose epidemic in cannabis. And they deleted it, right? We weren't selling anything. We weren't doing anything like that. It's hard to normalize it when you have a huge, and I hate to say this, I go back to the anti-smoking. There's a lot of NGOs out there, and I use that word loosely in terms of any of these foundations they are spending a lot of money. I don't know if you just saw, Hirsch, the Public Health Institute, and what they dropped as suggestions for California's cannabis program. And it's it's a group of scientists and doctors who are prohibitionist bent. If you wanted to take Prop 64 off life support and absolutely kill the recreational adult use market in California, follow their advice, right? We've got to normalize this. You got to just put freedom and liberty that two consensual adults have the right to both give, take, and partake in cannabis. And at some point, we need to just talk about what this is about. It's about freedom, and everything that Mark talked about, from the MORE Act to the CAOA, Mark, you talked about, is not about giving us freedom to do much other than try to pay a lot of taxes to enjoy consuming what effectively is a weed. And it's not going to work, because all you're going to do is once you decriminalize possession effectively with these legal adult markets, and you try to restrict supply with limited licensing, guess what happens? Economically, it just blows up the illicit market. And you're seeing that big time on the West Coast. And I think it's going to eat itself into all these legal markets for most of them, because there's no way they can compete on what's an ounce cost me.
So we are getting a lot of questions from on our interactive chat board from some of our cannabis coast to coast correspondents. I've noticed the Virginia cannabis, my man Joe in Virginia.
He hit it right there. Removing
He's doing a great job.
Altogether.
Bingo.
He just nailed it.
What's that?
Virginia Cannabis Connection said it has to be removed from the CSA, Controlled Substances Act, altogether. That is
Entirely.
the problem, the controlled substance. And that's a lot. It's a problem for a lot of things beyond cannabis, but let's just stick there.
Right. Well, by the way, that was Richard Nixon, who continues to haunt me. He haunted me as a 10, 12, 13, 14-year-old, I'm pretty sure. And it's still here. Shouldn't the CSA be rewritten at this point? Because we know so much more about different drugs. And
Jimmy,
or
this
is Big
is the
Pharma
problem.
not going to let us do that?
Right. Who's going to get to rewrite it? Big Pharma? It's not going to
Right.
change. They love it. It's working for them. That's why when our government is not looking like it's getting anything done, it's because it's working for the people with the money.
And Big Pharma has the most. I talked to a friend of mine who's a licensed vertical in Massachusetts, and he's scared that as if it gets legalized or even moved to Schedule 3, Big Pharma is going to control it, and it's going to put them all out of business. That's not good for the economy. The Big Pharma doesn't need any more money, right? And we have mostly craft people, small craft growers are going to get forced out. It's an opportunity here to do the right thing, right? But can we do that?
We have government by the few, for the fewer, at the expense of all us. It is 100% about the Supreme Court decision, which made speech money, corporations, people. We have lost our democracy, our republic, however you want to describe it, because at the end of the day, the billionaires matter. We don't.
Yeah.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Well
Hirsch.
put.
Hirsch, you going to chime in there?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, Jimmy, what you were saying earlier about Arkansas. I mean, I think that's really important to highlight. A similar thing is happening in Nebraska. So Nebraska has a medical cannabis initiative. They're trying to invalidate that as well, even though it got the right amount of signatures. So
a judge okayed it today.
You know, I did see that. Basically, the judge okayed the counting of the votes, but there still could be potential legal challenges to the votes after the fact.
Of course there are.
It's absurd. And look, I think maybe we all know this, people who are watching, but this is a pattern, right? So when Mississippi passed their medical initiative, right, the Supreme Court invalidated after the fact. South Dakota, when they passed their adult use initiative in 2020. So this is a pattern where the courts are being used to impede the will of the people on this issue, and it's undemocratic, and it shouldn't be able to stand. And we need to raise the visibility of this blatantly undemocratic pattern of behavior.
Yeah, there's a movement out there, the deschedule, not reschedule movement. Anybody have any insight on that, Mark or Sean? Go ahead.
An interesting point about this is the desensitization of the Schedule 1, right? And this is one of the things that the MORE Act does, actually taking and saying, well, we'll take it off the drug schedule, but we'll still retain all the same restrictions that we had as a Schedule 1. It's a very dangerous thing to do, particularly when you're looking at all the other things that are Schedule 1 that are out there. And suddenly realizing that if cannabis is removed from the drug schedule, it is basically a food. That's what it should have been all along. It is a food. Well, if you can take and put the restrictions that you put on a Schedule 1 drug on a food, you can put them on any food.
Right.
That's a very dangerous place to be.
Right. Can we agree that it's a plant medicine?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that happens.
I've been working with people with cancer for quite some time in that regard.
Tell us a little bit about what you do, Mark, because the stories you have are pretty powerful.
Well, I've collected stories over the last, 18, 19 years. And, at one point I had over 230 stories on YouTube of patients that I interviewed all across the country. I've interviewed people with every illness there is. And during my 7 years in Colorado, I started making cannabis oil just so that I would know how to make it. And then I was inundated with patients. All of a sudden, I've never advertised, never wanted to make cannabis oil for anyone, but I was barraged with all these people who were poor, who had children who were dying, and they were on hospice and they needed help. So I helped them, and they just kept coming, and from every part of the country. And the reason is because it does work. It does work. I stopped pediatric seizures in 3 minutes in my living room. I know it works. Now, it doesn't work for every form of seizure, and I know that. But the fact is that it does work. I've seen it work, and I guess we have to show that to every American. This was what brings us back to education. We can educate this country if we just spend the time to do it. If If we want to change the law in this country, we first have to bring education. We have to bring the education, the real education, not, oh, this gets you high and this one here will get you even higher. No, what we need is real education and understanding that this is truly medicine and can truly benefit everyone on this planet. We can demonstrate that for people if we just have that opportunity.
That's fantastic.
all.
Great way to kind of, does somebody else want to jump in?
I was just going to say, Gorski brings up a good point in your comment section. Since we're folks, that says move away from the word medicine and you won't have to worry about such restrictions. I agree 100% with what Mark said, but one of the issues here is who gets to define what is medicine, and that's the FDA's purview, and Pharma wants it that way, right? Because they don't want a competitive or substitutable product. So that's an interesting conundrum that's going to have to be reconciled, because to be called medicine just legally, we're going to have to stay within the FDA and define it that way, or we're going to have to take it out and call it something else. I don't know if it's nutraceutical or what the hell we want to call it, but part of the problem here is we've given the FDA authority and a small oligopoly, the big pharma, control over what's called medicine.
Yeah, I got to tell
you. Understand. Hippocrates said, let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food.
He's smarter than me, so I'll let him say.
Chris is going, yeah, I like that too. Hey, look, we're up against it again, guys. First of all, I mean, we could go for hours with this group talking. I mean, it's at a level that I really, it gets me Jones, as I used to say. I really do enjoy it. And we've had some great comments from our comment board, which is the first time we've ever done anything live with the comment board that I can actually read and see that isn't this big, and it's 15 feet away from me. So Eric, you did a hell of a job on that. And I really appreciate that. But I'd like to, one of the things we're instituting, and Mark, you mentioned this, everyone who understands the plant and has any history with the plant has a story. And one of the things we're going to be bringing to market is we're going to encourage the public to tell us, what is your cannabis story? Come out of the cannabis closet, admit that you've used it in some capacity, and what role has it played in your life? One of our comments was from one of our reporters, and he has epilepsy, and he uses it every day because it controls his seizures. Another one of our reporters on Cannabis Coast to Coast News has a son who's autistic, and she has to drive to school every day, take him out of school 1,000 feet, give him his medicine, and drive him back because no one in the school can administer those medicines. It's against the law in a legal state of Michigan. There's so many elements that this touches. So what I'd like to know, as we go right through it, and Eric, you get to answer this one too. What is your cannabis story? Mine is I started at age 14, and because I was ADHD, I know you're shocked to hear this, and it helped me focus, hyper focus, and it got me through school, got me into Tufts University, got me the ability to graduate, and I got a break that I became a sportscaster. And at age 30, when my son was born, I stopped everything for 10 years. And then as soon as that marriage ended, I picked it right back up again with a guy who had taken me in, a friend who had said, anytime I'm at that end, go to it. So cannabis as a medicine has always been part of my life. In 2013, when Massachusetts passed it and started its own medicinal program, I got my card in the first day because all I had to do was show them my hands. You guys see how gross they are? They're all arthritic fingers. And I have it throughout my body. And now I've had 5 major surgeries in 25 years. I'm working on trying to heal from within. Cannabis is part of that. I don't do it until at night when I start to feel my pain again. But that's my personal cannabis story. Hirsch, if you'd like to share, if nobody wants to share, that's okay too. But I think a lot of people need to hear that, hey, look, you've been successful and you actually have used this product for a number of years. So Hirsch, if you don't mind, would you share that with us?
Yeah, mine is running. I love to run, and cannabis helped me fall in love with running, which is my favorite form of exercise. We're learning more and more about how cannabis actually activates the same parts of the endocannabinoid system as running. And, I was in St. Louis today and went on a long, beautiful run after consuming some cannabis that cleared my head and made me feel amazing. And, it really integrates me, and those things integrate well with one another. So I could give you a million stories about how cannabis has enhanced my life, but that's, if you ask for one, and that's one.
That's great. Sean, go ahead.
I'll say what my kids, 4 kids, said to Sanjay Gupta. Seen him with 3 when we did that. Cannabis gave me my dad back, and I hear that all the time with our chapters and our kids. It really gives these vets their humanity back and allows them to connect with people, personal friends and family. And so that's what we hear all the time. It's saving lives, and that's the stories that why we're fighting for this.
There you go. Eric, go ahead.
You put me on the spot. It's okay.
That's what I do.
For me, it's straightforward. I was in a relationship and they were like, you got to try this. You got to try this. And I was like, no. I'm a hippie of the 80s, where it was like,
Wait. Hang on a second. The hippies were in the 60s. Okay. They weren't in the 80s.
But there were some remnants of that in the 80s.
Okay. Hippie wannabes. I get it. Yes. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I was not forced, but it was like, try it. And I said, okay. And it was a bong. And I said, wow, I feel really good. And I found myself socially drinking less afterwards. Okay. I felt more chill, relaxed. I always have that rule, I'm not driving afterwards per se until I'm like really down. But I came into the industry, I was recruited in the industry, and then just went woo right off. So thanks, Jimmy.
Sure, no problem. Mark, I know your story, and I'd love to hear that one again. It's very compelling.
Oh, well, it's just, I first started using cannabis when I was 16, something like that, 15, I guess it was, when I got my first joint that I tried. And it was like 4 years later, it was the first patient I actually worked with. And it was a good friend of mine who was dying of testicular cancer, and I provided him with his cannabis. Didn't even realize, all I knew back then was that it could maybe help him with the pain he was dealing with. I had no idea that it could actually help to eradicate cancer as well. But my diagnosis was, it was in 97, I guess it was. I was diagnosed with severe with fibromyalgia pain with severe migraines. And what cannabis did for me was it took away my migraines, which was huge. Understand, at one point I lost my center vision because of the migraines. I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything. And I was a certified welder and pipe fitter. You can't do that kind of work if you've got a blinding migraines. But yes, over the course of several years, as I was exposed to better and better quality cannabis, but what took away my migraines initially was very poor quality cannabis, which spoke tremendously to me. So yeah, that's what brought me into cannabis and got me started. And then it was realization that I was a middle-aged man living in Missouri, and I desperately needed cannabis to be able to live. What was I going to do? A middle-aged man trying to buy cannabis. At one point, I literally was buying cannabis from a guy up in downtown St. Louis out of his trunk of his car. Very poor quality cannabis at that, and paid a lot of money for it. So, I realized that we had to change the law in this country. We had to.
Absolutely. I think we've all met that guy before. Anyway, how do people, Mark, why don't you just say, how do we get to you? You have a website. Give your website a little plug. Go ahead.
My website is cannabispatientnetwork.com.
Yep.
I actually have a YouTube channel that is cannabispatientnetwork.org, though it's kind of, well, as you know, a lot of issues we're dealing with YouTube right now, and they're one by one taking and doing away with my videos that I've had up there for the last 17 years. And yeah, cannabispatientnetwork.com. You can find a lot of my articles that I have on there, and a few of my videos are available there too.
There you go. And Hirsch, tell me about the Ananda Strategy Group in LA.
Well, the website is anandastrategy.com, ANANDA strategy.com. And we work with brands and retailers and all kind of operators in the cannabis market and help them navigate the laws and regulations that exist.
And there's way too many of them. Okay, Sean, talk about Weed for Warriors project. Go ahead.
You can reach us, go to wfwproject.org. There's email there. Just contact us. We'll get back. For those of you in California, we have SB 34 events throughout the state. Look at our social media on our website. Instagram's our most active, WFW_project. And SB 34 is where we give free cannabis away through the legal system. Amazing events, and we're doing them 8 this month. So look for one in your area.
There you go. Well, I want to thank all you guys for showing up short notice, and we pulled it off, and you guys did a great job. Eric, you can do this every day as far as I'm concerned. You did a hell of a job directing, and I believe we've live streamed. We've had great comments from our group, and a reminder to please like, share, and subscribe to not only our YouTube channel. And by the way, we're only 300 short of 15,000, and it's been kind of on hold for about 6 to 8 weeks. I'd really like to see if we can get enough people to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get us over that 15,000 hump, please, because I've been tired of rounding up all the time. And then next week, the Cannabis Coast to Coast news show will resume with our very talented Elena Pinto as the main anchor. So for Eric Williamson and everybody on the pro-cannabis media side of things here, I am the founder, Jimmy Young. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, it's a whole new world to meet out there, people.